Welcome, everyone. I'm Matt Kaufman, and
I'm Chris Stiegel. I'm loud.
yeah, let's.
Yeah, and this is Prove Agentforce ROI and Admin's Playbook. That's us again. I'm the one on the left. Matt's the one on the right. A little bit about me. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for like 13, 14 years now. I started sort of by accident, the same way I think a lot of admins do. I was a business development rep making cold calls, and I hated it. So I complained a lot about our Salesforce org, and I was like, how come I can't do this? How come I can't do that? And they finally got frustrated and like, you do it. And I was off the phones, and I was adminning, and it was good. And then left that job, ended up quite a few other places, and then ultimately found MK Partners, and I was like, I used Salesforce before. This could be really good. And it was so different because it was Lightning now. It was not Classic. They had acquired a ton of things. But that was great because it meant I got to start over as a beginner, sort of, and sort of relearn, re-experience what it's like to be a brand new admin. And it makes these kind of talks really fun because I have sort of that fresh perspective again.
Yeah, and I started my journey in 2002, almost 24 years ago, this May, as an employee at Salesforce. And in 2006, I had left and I started MK Partners, a Salesforce consulting firm, but we also produce apps on the App Exchange. And over the years, I've worked as a trainer, as a consultant, a developer, an architect, an admin, and whatever needed to be done to make the customers happy. So it's been a very long journey, but I love sharing the information that we learn with folks like you here at TDX and other events.
All right, I think it turns out that I thought they were all out of coffee by now, but it turns out they're still giving them away downstairs, so feel free to leave us a review. You only get coffee if it's a good review, apparently. That's what they told me. But yeah, this slide is again at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, so you'll be able to get it. You can also get it in the app.
Yeah.
Forward-looking statement, we don't work for Salesforce, so it doesn't apply as much here, but do take that into consideration.
Yeah. It's going to ask you a quick question here. Feel free to pick whatever you want, and then, all right.
So we're here talking about the pressures of administrators. We're often asked to just do stuff, and we have to take some time to figure out, well, why are we doing this? Is this a good idea? We often have to figure out what is the ROI, the return on the investment of what we're about to do. And actually, we were talking about this earlier, Chris and I. We should have been doing this before we started working with Salesforce. So before we implemented Salesforce at our companies, we should have all said, well, wait a minute. How long does it currently take to answer customer service requests? Or how many sales do we currently do? Too late, right? And then how about last month, somebody probably created a new field, a new report. Did you measure the ROI for that either? So every day as admins, we're constantly doing things for our companies and we're not really tracking the ROI. So we're going to talk a lot about that today.
Yeah.
And especially it'll allow you to see, is this having an impact? So yes, the impact is someone was nagging you to do something, you did it, now you're not being nagged. Of course, there's a positive impact there, but we want to know, is there a positive impact for the company as a whole? And so we want to be able to measure that and see, is it working as we go along? And then what's great is if you do start to track this ROI, you can kind of showcase, okay, this was a good idea, we should do this again. And when I say we, I really mean you, the Salesforce management team, not necessarily the company as a whole, but that we're talking more almost about you as Salesforce admins than we are about AI today.
Yeah. And the pressure comes from internally, like you feel that pressure, but also externally. You guys are going to get back from TDX. There's a high likelihood that your bosses say, I know it was nothing but Agentforce. What's the ROI on that? Should we roll it out now? It's going to cost us money. Can we justify that? Or after you get the thing that you wanted and you fought for it, in a year they're going to say, should we renew? And so it's this like ever-evolving battle that we should be doing, and I think a lot of us neglect. So for Agentforce, we'll get ahead of it.
Yeah.
The problem is that AI is out there already. It's deployed. Agentforce might not be in your org, but there's a great chance that you personally and other colleagues at work are already using AI on a personal level, helping them with their day-to-day tasks. And they find value in that, but again, they probably have not tracked their baselines. They don't know what the actual return is, but it makes it difficult then you can't like hide your head in the sand on this one. You can't say, oh, we're years away from AI. And even if you could, there's some steps you should be taking right now.
Yeah.
Because it is inevitable.
The reality is everyone is using it, and because everyone's using it on their own and not as a corporate tool, we're not able to measure that. They might be paying for it on their own too, so that you don't have to necessarily measure the ROI, but we want to think about how we can use our admin powers to deliver corporate tools, and then we can measure it and have an impact.
Yeah, and AI does offer some additional trickiness because of the pricing model, not just Agentforce, but the way you spend tokens, and it's hard to estimate how many tokens something is going to cost. And if Steve is using the free version of ChatGPT, but Doug's paying $20 a month, is he getting more out of it? And so hopefully we can sort of address all of that here.
Yeah, so why specifically is ROI difficult? Well, like I said, we've all been working in our Salesforce orgs already, and we never took the time to really start measuring. And so if you don't have that baseline, you don't know the impact. Our success isn't did we do what we needed to do, did we get the job done? Our success is actually measured in this marketing blurb where we say, hey, look what I did. We started off with a baseline of answering 1,000 cases a day, and now we're able to do 1,100. That's success, not, oh, I added 3 fields to the page and made this one not required anymore. That's not something that you cheer about, right? And so we really need to start measuring these baselines. And like I said, we should have been doing it already. So the number one thing that we want to do as soon as we get home is start measuring those baselines. If you don't have the metrics to be able to tell how something is doing today, you're not going to have the metrics to tell what the impact was for all the changes that you're going to implement.
Yeah. And that's a good point that if somebody comes to you tomorrow and says, how is TDX? Should we get Agentforce? What's the return? You're going to have to say, well, we need to start by setting a baseline. And that baseline should run for a chunk of time that's going to be a reasonable amount to make an estimate. If you're lucky enough to go back to work tomorrow and nobody says anything, that's an even better time to start the baseline so that in 6 months, a year, 2 years, when they say, I just bought Agentforce, the AE gave me a great deal, you say, awesome, I have baseline set, I have stuff, and then you'll seem proactive. And you can even go to other departments and ask them for their baseline. We'll get into that, I think. I think I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So what's the admin opportunity here? I think one of the fun things about the Salesforce ecosystem as an admin is they are constantly acquiring software, coming up with new features and things, and I feel like we all interact with users and people that are like, I don't want anything new, I don't want to change anything. I think Salesforce admins are sort of unique in our excitement over new features, and we are good at separating the fluff from the reality. We're good at seeing 100 new things at Dreamforce and going, oh, here's the 6 that are relevant to me, let me build my calendar around that. But our ability to get excited about new products helps us stay at the forefront of where Salesforce is going, which helps us stay relevant in our roles and stay valuable to our companies. So if you are an admin that can be excited about new things, then you add value to your team and your own role. It helps you update your resume so you can build a career somewhere else. It helps you dodge the layoff hatchet if it's coming around. And it helps you sort of be friendly throughout the rest of the company. So the admin opportunity here with AI is you have the opportunity to prove its value, and in doing so, also prove your own value. Because whether we like it or not, a lot of times the effectiveness of Salesforce falls on us, even if it's an issue with somebody not adopting it, salespeople not entering their calls.
Or not paying attention in training, not reading the documentation, that type of stuff. It's not your fault, but it still falls on your shoulders.
Yeah. So this is an opportunity for us to prove the value of new product, and then also prove that we have a strategic mind as well as a tactical one.
Yeah. So what are the types of things that we're wanting to measure? So we want to measure effort, and that could be, if we're talking about like customer service, how many clicks does it take to close a case or to resolve a case? You have to edit the case, you might have to look for knowledge, maybe you have to send some emails internally. And so all that work that goes into doing the job, whether it's closing a case or closing an opportunity, that's the effort. And those are things that we are able to measure today. You should be able to run reports on, okay, well, how many knowledge articles were added, things like that. How many times is a case updated? Those are things that we can measure using our admin powers because we have the ability to create formula fields and use flows to track things and create hidden fields behind the scenes to track date, time, stuff like that. Well within our power, but you got to start doing it right away. Speed's another good one. So if we stick with the customer service analogy, how long does it take for a case to get resolved is a very common metric that most people using Service Cloud measure. And that's one that you should be measuring if you're not already. Obviously, we know when the case was created. That's being tracked. And typically, we can find it when the case is resolved by when it's closed. So that's easy, too. Same thing with opportunities. We usually can tell when an opportunity is created, and we can tell when it was won. And so we can use our admin abilities to measure the speed just as easily. And these 4 points here are kind of in order from difficult, easy to difficult. So we start usually with the first 2. Next would be like accuracy, and this is a little harder because often it takes a human to determine was that accurate. But again, sticking with customer service, common metric is how often do we reopen a case because the first solution didn't actually work. I used to work way before Salesforce, so decades ago. I used to work tech support, and we were always under pressure to close cases, close them quickly. Don't let them sit open. And so you'd send out the response to the customer saying, yeah, just restart your computer. Thanks so much. Click, and you'd close the case. But then they'd call back 5 minutes later and say, yeah, that didn't work. Can you please tell me what to do? And you'd go, okay, try this. Control-Alt-Delete, and click. And you would keep doing that, just hoping that it would work. Well, that's not good. That's not accurate. And the result is the customers aren't happy. And so this is something that you should be able to measure right now. You might have to put in some additional logic to tie the new case with the old case, or measure how often the cases or how many times the cases were reopened. But accuracy is something that you want to measure, especially when we're talking about AI. And then finally, the last one, and this is the hardest one actually for us as admins, because this is really out of our control, but it is important to your companies, is the revenue. And this also requires measuring over a longer period of time too, right? It's hard to improve revenue in a day, but over the course of quarters or years, you should be able to improve revenue. And so that's the last one. So again, we typically want to go in order from easy to difficult. So when we talk about what you want to measure, start with the easier ones.
Yeah. And the other thing about sort of the order, it's not only easier to measure, but there's a knock-on effect of if you can save effort. So if it's usually a 3-person meeting to settle something, but now it's 2 people meeting and an agent taking notes or an agent supplementing those decisions, that frees up another person to then go do their tasks, and that increases speed in that area. That also means that they have more time to review existing cases or review things and improve the accuracy. So it's because those are all sort of like one layer apart, it does become a little bit harder to evaluate the direct benefit of it. So that's why I sort of start on the end, and then you'll notice these knock-on benefits, and then you can finally get to revenue.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the Agentforce impact areas? Where does Agentforce shine? I don't know if you guys saw any sessions about Agentforce this TDX, but it's smarter decisions, faster actions, and less manual work. And this is not just Agentforce, but artificial intelligence in general, but Agentforce specifically in our world as admins. It really has expanded a lot. And so you can sort of see just at a glance how these would tie into effort, speed, accuracy, and revenue. But how it's also more obviously tied to those first couple, where I can reduce effort with smarter decisions. It takes me, less work to come up with the right choice. Faster actions means I can move on more quickly. Things are being done more quickly. Less manual work is an effort saver. And so then, again, since we know what we want to measure, we know where Agentforce is going to impact those things. Right.
And so when we talk about AI, we often have to talk about data. So we're admins. We know what it's like. There's duplicates, there's messy data. Often that's because end users don't put it in correctly, but sometimes we have sources bringing data into our Salesforce, and that's just the way it is. If we're gonna, as a human, look at 2 records, we can tell, we just know. We know this is the better one, this is the right one. We don't always have a way to easily describe how we know that. It's just intuition. But AI has to follow rules. And so it can't just say, I know because I know. It has to be well-defined rules and instructions. And the last thing we want is for AIs to rely on bad data when it's making the decision. If you think about sales data, and we're talking about leads or something like that, we get a lot of leads. The example that I used yesterday, we're all in this room because we already use Salesforce, which means that there's a contact record for each of us in Salesforce's org, right? Then we signed up for TDX. That created another record. Then we came to a session. That created another one. I did a hack downstairs. That created can you imagine how much data we created just by coming to TDX? And somehow that has to get unified because every time I fill out the form, I sometimes put Matt, I sometimes put Matthew, I sometimes misspell something because I'm in a rush or I'm on my phone. And that needs to be unified. And so luckily, we have Data 360 to help us do that. And so what Data 360 does is it takes all the disparate data inside Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or in our Salesforce in general, and it's able to unify that so that we have a perfect record of, okay, how many leads did we actually get last month? I don't care how many lead records we got, right? If a business person asks you how many new leads did we get last month, they're not asking how many lead records. They actually want to know what was our ability to generate new business. And if I'm filling out the form again because I sign up for like a new org all the time, that's not a lead. That doesn't count. No one's going to get more money because I'm trying to do a challenge, a quest on Trailhead, right? And so we need to unify that data and clean it up using ideally Data 360. And that way our AIs can use that unified data to make the right decisions. And when it comes to measuring, we want to make sure we're measuring with the clean data. So a lot of us have probably been involved in projects where we're fixing something, we're implementing something, and halfway through you realize, oh, this thing's been wrong forever, like years. And now you have this dilemma. Do I fix it? And it might make things look worse next month, but at least it'll be accurate. Or do I not fix it and kind of live the lie that this number is the number that we all rely on, even though it's totally not true? And the last thing you want as an admin is to say, okay, I'm going to bring improvement to this org and to this company, and halfway through that project realize, oh, we got to fix that number, and it's going to make me look bad. They're going to blame the project. When in reality, you want to fix that earlier. So when we're talking about gathering that baseline and the metrics, you got to clean up the data. You got to use something like Data 360 to make sure that you know your real numbers. And that way, when you implement AI in Agentforce, there's no chance that you somehow have to fix something else at the same time.
And I feel like this looks very straightforward to all of us who have been sitting in these sessions and coming to Dreamforces and TDXs, but it's good to remember that other folks at your organization aren't going to have this understanding, that AI is going to be reliant on the data foundation that you lay and that you have, because there are people that think AI is a magical box that will solve all your problems. You can give it whatever you want and say, give me a strategy, make me a business that'll make $1 billion. And it's very important to remind folks that AI lives in the middle there as like a contextual tool. It takes the data, it contextualizes it the same way that like our brains are really good at, and then drives outcomes. And also important to remember that when AI fails, it doesn't fail spectacularly, usually. If you give AI a bunch of different information, it will come up with different conclusions that will all seem sort of right. And then you'll end up in a situation like Matt's describing where it's down the road and you realize like our assumptions have been wrong, something went wrong, and it's because you didn't lay the foundation you needed. And that's going to affect your ROI. So what we need to do is come up with a KPI framework. So that will help us figure out what our return actually is. And the KPI framework is going to have 3 important components: input, activity, and outcome. The input is what we're changing. It's the variable. It's what, in this case, it's using Agentforce to do X, what we're trying to actually make it do. And then the activity is the effect that that's having on the day-to-day, effort, on the activity itself. And then ultimately, that will drive the outcome. And it's important to remember this because a lot of times you'll get instructed, or a department will get instructed, to start with the outcome. A lot of people's KPIs are, close more deals. But that's not something that's easy to do. There's variables that go into that, and then activities driven by those variables, and then that leads to more closed deals. So you can't just say, close cases faster, or you end up in a situation where people are responding, marking it closed, and your KPIs become meaningless.
Yeah. End users will always find a way to kind of like work around the issues, right? If I need to close a higher % of my deals, well, I'm only going to create 1 deal a month, and I'm only going to create it after I've already closed it. 100% done, right? So when it comes to picking the KPIs, this is really important. You almost have to start at the end. Don't pick the KPIs because you want to fix an issue. Pick the KPIs because you know you can measure it. So figure out ahead of time, what are the things that we can measure today? And then think about, can I improve it? Because if you have a measurement that you can't improve, don't bother picking it, right? And ideally, you're improving it with AI, and it's going to be a positive change. So you don't want to pick a measurement that you're going to make worse, right? Tie it to some bigger business goal. So we want to close more deals. Great. The goal is to make more money, of course. But we're going to pick something small, like we want to reduce the amount of time it takes to close a deal, right? Or we want to make the ability to pick add-on products faster. Something as part of the process. So we're supporting the bigger goal, but we're not actually fixing that big goal. We're just supporting them by picking something that we can measure, something that we can improve with AI, and something that ideally we'll be able to do it in a reasonable amount of time, so it's not years or decades. But the first step is always setting that baseline, so you know where are we at today. And now I know, okay, I'm going to set a goal of making that better.
All right, and then step 2 is going to be tracking the impact. So the first one, we had our variable. Now we have our activity, the impact we're having. And the easiest way to do that, the most obvious, is before and after. We have our baseline. We know what our before was, what our current status quo is, and then our after. And ideally, the after is better than the before. But if it's not, that's a good indication that you should stop what you did. It's still a chance to learn and develop. But also, we want to be able to look at trends over time, because that's really going to show us whether or not what we're doing makes sense to continue doing. Because if we see, slight improvement and then a rapid rise, we know, okay, there's a little bit of a slow burn. Maybe it's driven by adoption or something else, but something happens and then we capture this value. So it's worth waiting a little bit on our rollout. If we see an immediate burst and then a plateau, well, then we can try taking a step back and seeing if we maintain that plateau after we've removed the thing. So then we can capture even more of a return and cut down on the investment. Or if you see the line go up and then go down, then you know when to cut it off. Because if you just look at before and after and then you stop looking, you could see an immediate improvement and then something changes and you don't realize anything's changed because nobody calls you every time they change something. And then all of a sudden it's a year later and they say, hey, our numbers are worse. And it all happened because you did this. And you'll go, oh, but yeah.
So it's really important that you set up a way to do these measurements or capture these metrics on a regular and ongoing basis so you can see, are we having a positive impact? And if we're not, okay, let's reassess. Maybe we've got to tweak some stuff. Maybe it is an adoption issue, or maybe we just didn't have the right requirements to begin with. But you want to be able to capture it at the beginning, capture it throughout, and then continue to capture it at the end, because ideally, once you have this one, you're going to keep building on it.
Yeah, and I missed the third one, I guess, but adoption matters. You do a lot of work building stuff, and if nobody uses it, then it's not going to have an effect. And just because something doesn't have an effect doesn't necessarily mean it didn't work. It could be that nobody's using it. So it's important to also track adoption somehow so that you can tell whether or not what your efforts are worth it or whether or not you need to work on getting people to adopt those efforts and to support you.
Yeah, so we have our admin superpowers already, right? This is the room. This is how we're able to do this today. So we use reports, we use dashboards, we can schedule those to go out. And it's really important that you keep yourself accountable. You don't necessarily have to send it to the whole company, but make sure that you and someone else above you can see this so that you're going to stay on top of it. If you're the only one looking at it, you're going to get busy with requests to do stuff, and you're not going to necessarily have time to look at it every week, and you're going to skip it, and then you might miss something really important. So you want it to go out so that you're going to remember, oh, Friday at noon, that's when the really important dashboard is going to be shared with these people. I got to make sure that all of our salespeople adopted my new AI process, or figure out why no one's clicking on this new button that I added, that type of thing. And so if it's being shared weekly or some regular basis, you'll stay on top of it too. It's really within our superpowers, right? The things that we're using here are things that we do every day for our end users. It's just now we're doing it for ourselves too, so that we can showcase everything we do.
Yeah, and this will also take all of our efforts and couch them in a language that we understand and that the other people in our organization understand, because they're all well-versed in dashboards. They know how to look at graphs and charts and read the patterns that are there. And so this helps us sort of talk the same language we've always been talking, make this feel like an extension of Salesforce, not some new thing that we should be worried about.
Right. At the end of the day, there's so many things that are going on in the world that are out of our control. So there's many reasons why sales may dip. it doesn't necessarily mean that it's because of something that we did as an admin. Or maybe the number of cases have increased recently. That doesn't mean it's something we did as an admin. It could be we got a lot more customers, so of course they increased. And that means it's going to take longer time for us to resolve and things like that. But if you have these metrics to show that the work that you've done has actually had a positive effect, despite what may be happening in the bigger picture, then you're able to prove how valuable you are.
Yeah, that's actually a good addition to the why adoption matters, because if you have a company and somebody leaves the company and they don't replace that person right away, and all of a sudden your metrics, your KPIs start turning negative, you'll be able to say, oh, that's because I know we have one less person working in this space. If you don't have visibility into that adoption and into those efforts, you might have no idea that department got smaller. And so you might think it's your fault that things are slowing down. And then last, and this is sort of the most important, and also I think one of the things that a lot of us struggle with as more technically minded people, and that is telling the story, celebrating our wins, and being proud of the things that we've accomplished. I think one of the reasons that we struggle with it is because there are things that we do that seem really easy to us, but they seem really hard to other people, and we go, well, it's easy for me because I know how to do it. And it's impressive to them because they don't know how to do it, but we don't feel right bragging about that. But we have to kind of get rid of that sort of mentality when it comes to telling the story, because we want people to be excited about what we've accomplished, and that's really what ROI is it's bragging about the value you've provided. And any chance we can take to illustrate our value as admins is good for us personally, good for us mentally, good for us career-wise. And so this is how you tell that story. You look at what changed, and that's the effort that you put in, that's the inputs. You focus on why it matters, and then you talk about what's next. So our what's changed is we used Agentforce to pre-screen these cases, and so automatically take 50% of cases off of our customer service reps' plate. Why that matters is now my reps have 50% more time to address these trickier cases, or that's your opportunity to contextualize the benefit that you provided with that change. And that is one way that you can kind of help yourself do that if you have trouble bragging about yourself, is you're also bragging for that department. Like that department, you are a champion of theirs now when you say, hey, we changed this and sales saw X results, service saw X results. That makes them look good in those meetings, and that makes you look good in those meetings. So think about it as bragging about the rewards to your users as opposed to, I did this thing and it's really cool. And then lastly, what's next? Because you've shown that you can make a change, you've shown the impact that it can have, and now you can start talking about scaling, you can start talking about moving into other departments, and you can really sort of expand your influence as an admin to become somebody that helps every department, where you have teams that don't even touch Salesforce. But now with Data 360 pulling in their bits of data, and then we've got Agentforce acting on it, I can save time with departments or effort or accuracy that have never been touched, have never been part of my realm. And again, that makes you more valuable as admins. It makes you harder to fire. It makes it easier for you to demand more money when you go interview at another job, which I think is the reason that we come to these things is because we want to stay on top of our knowledge, we want to be valuable, and being able to tell the story of the changes you've made is such an important part of that. And I think those of us that have a hard time even updating our resume know that.
Right. You know, we come here and we learn a lot at these sessions, we learn a lot on Trailhead too, and we kind of move past those headshots that are out there in the hallway or up on the website with somebody with their story about how at their company they did something really impressive and they improved things. That's what we need to do for ourselves. So yeah, we can learn all the technical stuff from Trailhead and from the help documentation stuff too. We need to learn that little bit of self-promotion that Salesforce is really good at. Just follow their technique where we take our headshot and we say, I helped customer service by implementing Agentforce. I was able to improve response times, that type of thing. And Chris and I were actually talking about this the other day. We're like, we each don't really feel comfortable doing it for ourselves, but we're totally fine doing it for each other. So I don't mind promoting Chris, and he doesn't mind promoting me. So you almost just have to find a buddy And luckily, Salesforce has a great community, so it doesn't necessarily even have to be someone that you work with at your company. It could just be a friend that you've made in the community who will kind of put together a slide deck or a little PDF about you and what you did at the company. It just takes a second for you to give them the headshot and the little blurb about what metric that you're measuring you've now improved.
Yeah. And with something that we kind of do already, you have those catch-up conversations where it's the person that you talk to every couple of months, and the conversation is, oh, what's new? What are you doing at your job? What new responsibilities? And so all you have to do is build in a little, after the call, I'm going to write up a little summary of what you told me. I'm going to send it to you. And now you have a little summary of the improvements that you've made that you could bring into your next performance review, you can add to your resume, you can be proud of.
All right, so we're going to come home and we're going to start working on this right away. We want to make sure that you don't fall into a common mistake or a pitfall. The first thing is don't bite off more than you can chew. Again, we want to choose simple KPIs, just 1 or 2 KPIs. We're not going to revolutionize the company to start. We're going to pick something that's very easy to do. And again, we have those admin superpowers to look at fields and figure out, okay, response times, case age, number of opportunities, number of leads. These are things that we can already run reports on, and we can do it quickly. Start with something easy. Make sure that you have that baseline. We should have been doing it already, but we're going to start tomorrow. That's our TDX resolution, is to start with these baselines and figure out what are we currently doing. And then once we have a decent amount of time of that baseline, you can't do it in one day, you got to measure it over time, then we can figure out, okay, what can people actually benefit from? And it has to be something that they will use. So you can build the most amazing tool in the world, but if no one's going to use it, what was the point, right? If anything, it looks worse because you spent all your time doing something that no one's using. So make sure that you're going to work with your end users. Ideally, you identify a champion who's going to be someone who likes to adopt new things or is interested in trying to be better, and somebody who is liked or respected by their colleagues. So if you're working with the sales department, you're going to pick a salesperson who is usually hitting their numbers because people want to try to do what they're doing, right? If it's customer service, you're going to pick someone who customers always give great reviews of that service agent saying that they really solved my problem. You want that person because everyone tries to be like them. And if you can get them to adopt what you've built, then they'll spread the word. You don't even have to spread the word. They're going to ask one day in a meeting, oh, how did you close so many cases? And they say, well, I use that new Agentforce tool that our admin rolled out. So start planning ahead of time. Figure out what are the metrics that you're going to measure, and who are you going to work with to make sure that this becomes a popular feature. Yeah, and it's another one of those opportunities to make yourself somebody else's hero, because the same way that we don't have our baselines set up ahead of time, you could bet the other departments also don't. And they're also going to get the same call in 6 months that says, hey, we're rolling out Agentforce. Here, what can we expect from your team? And they're going to come to you and say, what can we expect? And if you go to them tomorrow, or you send out an email or post it to Slack and say, hey guys, AI is very real. We know it's going to be on the roadmap in the future. We need baselines now, so when that happens, we can make intelligent choices, we can track our progress, we can immediately determine ROI. You can start tracking that now, and then in 6 months, when the head of sales tells the sales department, like, we're bringing in Agentforce to be, a BDR, they'll have the baselines, and they'll look really smart, and they'll know it was because you came to them and told them, hey, we got to start tracking that. So this is your opportunity to help every department get ahead of the curve, and that's something that, like, if you can help your coworkers avoid mistakes, I love it when somebody helps me avoid a mistake, and it happens a lot. And that sort of ties into what leadership wants. Leadership wants clear metrics. So that's why we're setting those easy to track KPIs first and starting with effort and speed. They want a simple story, which is why we really hit step 4. Make sure you can tell the story about what you changed, the impact it had, and what's next. Because leadership also wants to be able to take those stories and make decisions. So the more you can put yourself in the position of helping make those decisions or recommending decisions, the more valuable you are. And then lastly, the business impact. So that's the return. And there's the leadership in your company. There's also the leadership inside your head asking for these same things. It's frustrating if you work for months and months on something and then you're not even sure that it had an impact. That should never happen, And you can make sure that doesn't happen if you take the steps necessary to track your efforts along the way. Right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to start, define what we're going to measure. So pick something small. It's going to be a metric. It's in line with our bigger business goals, but it's not the final step. It's just a small piece of it. So we're going to define that. Then we start measuring. Again, should have done it already, but we're doing it tomorrow. We're going to measure and just set it up so it's always going to be measured from now on. So that we're never going to stop measuring this. It's just going to be something that we do on a regular basis, weekly, quarterly, monthly, whatever it may be. Share that measurement out there. Hold yourself accountable. And also, this will be a way for you to show that, hey, I could fix this. I'm measuring our case response time, and I'm seeing that it's not that high, not that quick. So if you guys are interested, I could fix that. So when you're sharing this with other people, at some point someone's going to notice. And then once you've done that and you start to improve, then you can expand to bigger and bigger pieces, right? So don't bite off too much at the beginning. Start with something small. Prove yourself, show that you know what you're doing, and it'll be a lot easier to build on top of that.
Yeah. And the other benefit of measuring is not only can you recognize, like create that situation where it's like, oh, I could fix that, is you might find that the thing that you're measuring doesn't have an impact on the success of that department or on revenue. You might find that these things still change despite this doing exactly what you want. And that saves you a bunch of time in the future when you're rolling out Agentforce or building something new, and they say, hey, we want to affect these things. You go, well, I know it's not this. And once I knew it was not this, I started a new baseline. And so it helps you, again, look like the hero because you're taking the initiative to keep track of metrics and letting yourself make data-driven decisions, which is like one of the big selling points of Salesforce. That's why folks bought it. So the final thought is, if you can't measure it, did you even do anything? And I think it's one of those things that feels really real when you read it, and you know you did stuff, and it's a bummer when you did stuff, but you can't prove that you did anything. You can't prove the impact that it had. And you should never feel that way. So don't feel that way.
Yeah, we all do a lot of stuff, and we're so busy we don't have time to keep track of it all. And so you really need to be able to do that. Start first by keeping track of what you're doing, and then you'll see the impact and be able to show it to everybody.
All right, and then there on the left-hand side is this deck. It's also got the other 4 talks from today that are about Data 360, Agentforce roadmap. I think I might need to add this deck to that folder, so I'll do that right after this. So you'll have all 5 decks in there. But I will leave that up there so you guys can grab it now, because this has changed a little bit from the one that was uploaded to the website. And I'll wait for all those phones to go. I'm going to stop my phone from recording.
Yeah. And we'll step outside also, so if you do have questions, you can always come outside and ask us there. I'm always happy to answer questions. And then don't forget about the surveys. You'll actually, if you came into the room, you got scanned, and so it'll be in the app. You'll be able to, thank you. You'll be able to do that survey and potentially still get the Starbucks gift card downstairs.
I am also always willing to ask questions, but I am going to run to the airport, so I might not be as accessible after this. I'm willing, I'm just in a rush. Yeah. And thank you guys so much for coming.